One evening, after a particularly cruel encounter with the widow who had raised her, Elara made another wish in anger. She wished for the widow to suffer, to feel the loneliness and pain that had filled her own heart for so many years. The next morning, the widow was found lying in her bed, paralyzed and unable to speak. She could In a small desolate village on the outskirts of a dark forest lived a girl named Elara. She had been orphaned at birth, left on the doorstep of an old widow who took her in, but gave her little warmth or care. Elara grew up in poverty, with no family to call her own, and the villagers treated her with disdain. They whispered behind her back, called her cursed, and avoided her like the plague. The children mocked her ragged clothes, threw stones at her as she passed, and the adults turned a blind eye to her suffering. Every night, Elara would return to her small cold room in the widow's house, clutching her only possession, a tattered old blanket that once belonged to her mother. She would cry herself to sleep, her heart filled with anger and bitterness. The villagers' cruelty seemed never-ending, and she had no one to protect her, no one to care whether she lived or died. The world had shown her nothing but pain, and she felt utterly alone. One cold misty morning, while searching the forest for firewood, Elara stumbled upon something unusual. Deep in the underbush, half buried beneath the fallen leaves, was a strange gleaming object. As she brushed the dirt away, she realized it was an amulet, an old withered piece of jewelry that shimmered with an eerie glow. It was shaped like an eye, with intricate carvings around the edges and a deep red gemstone in the center. Elara felt a strange pull toward the amulet, as if it were calling to her. She hesitated for a moment, but then, driven by curiosity and a desire for something, anything that might bring her comfort, she picked it up. The moment her fingers closed around the amulet, she felt a rush of warmth shoot through her body. It was as if the amulet was alive and it had chosen her. She slipped the amulet around her neck, and from that moment on, everything changed. That evening, after another brutal encounter with the village children who had mocked her, Elara felt a rage build inside her like never before. As she lay in bed, tears streaming down her face, she whispered under her breath, "I wish they knew how it felt. I wish they felt my pain." The next morning, the village was buzzing with news. The children who had tormented Elara had fallen ill, terribly ill. Their bodies were covered in painful rashes, and they writhed in agony, unable to sleep or eat. The healers had no explanation, and the villagers were terrified. Elara, shocked and confused, began to realize that the amulet had granted her wish. It had given her the power to curse those who wronged her. At first, she was frightened by this discovery, but as the days passed, she began to feel something else, something darker, a sense of justice, a sense of power. The next time someone hurt her, an old man who spat at her as she walked by, she whispered another wish under her breath. By morning, the man's hands were twisted with pain, his fingers gnarled and useless. The village whispered of a dark curse spreading through their community, but no one suspected Elara, the quiet, meek orphan girl who had been the target of their cruelty for so long. With each curse she cast, Elara felt stronger, more in control of her life. For the first time, she wasn't powerless. She could make them all pay for the years of suffering they had caused her. She revealed in it the fear in their eyes, the way they avoided her, the way they whispered in hushed tones whenever she passed. But as the amulet's power grew, so did its hunger. It whispered to her in the dead of night, urging her to curse more, to punish more, to let the darkness consume her completely. At first, Elara resisted the voice. She didn't want to hurt the innocent. She only wanted to punish those who had hurt her. But the amulet had its own will, and it was far stronger than she could have ever imagined. One evening, after a particularly cruel encounter with the widow who had raised her, Elara made another wish in anger. She wished for the widow to suffer, to feel the loneliness and pain that had filled her own heart for so many years. The next morning, the widow was found lying in her bed, paralyzed and unable to speak. She could no longer move or care for herself, and the villagers whispered that it was a sign from the gods. Elara, horrified by what she had done, tried to take off the amulet, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how hard she pulled, it stayed locked around her neck, the gemstone glowing brighter than ever. The voice in her head grew louder, more insistent. It told her that this was her destiny, that she was meant to be more than just a weak, forgotten orphan. She was chosen to wield this power, to bring justice to those who had wronged her. Days turned into weeks, and the amulet's influence over Elara deepened. She no longer needed to wish out loud. Her mere thoughts could bring suffering to those around her. She cursed anyone who crossed her path, even those who hadn't hurt her directly. The village was gripped with fear as one by one, its inhabitants fell victim to strange and terrible misfortunes. Some went blind, others lost their homes to fire, and a few simply disappeared without a trace. But the amulet's power came with a terrible price. The more Elara used it, the more it drained her spirit. She became consumed by the darkness, her eyes hollow, her face pale and gaunt. She could feel the weight of the amulet pressing down on her chest, suffocating her, but she couldn't stop. The voice in her head, the spirit within the amulet, had taken control. It was no longer just a tool for her revenge. It was using her as a vessel for its own sinister purpose. One night, as she stood in front of the mirror, Elara saw something that chilled her to the bone. Her reflection wasn't her own. Staring back at her was the face of a woman with hollow eyes and a wicked smile. The spirit had finally revealed itself. "You've served me well, Elara," the spirit whispered, its voice echoing in her mind. "But now it's time for me to take what's mine." Elara tried to scream, but no sound came out. She felt her body go rigid, her limbs no longer her own. The spirit was taking over, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The amulet pulsed with dark energy, and Elara felt herself slipping away, her consciousness fading into the void. In a last desperate attempt to save herself, Elara stumbled out of the house and ran to the village elder, the only person who might know how to break the curse. The elder listened to her story with grave concern and told her that the amulet was a vessel for a vengeful spirit, a spirit that had been wronged in life and was using Elara to exert its revenge on the living. "There is only one way to break the curse," the elder said, her voice low and somber. "You must return the amulet to the place where the spirit was buried, and face the darkness head-on. But be warned, child, if you fail, the spirit will claim your soul forever." Terrified but determined, Elara set out on a perilous journey into the heart of the forest, to the ruins of an ancient graveyard where the spirit body had been laid to rest centuries ago. The forest was thick with fog, the air heavy with dread. Every step felt like a battle against unseen forces, but Elara pressed on, knowing that her time was running out. When she reached the graveyard, the ground trembled beneath her feet. The trees seemed to whisper her name, and the wind howled through the crumbling tombstones. In the center of the graveyard stood a single unmarked grave, its earth undisturbed for years. Elara knelt before the grave, clutching the amulet in her trembling hands. She could feel the spirit's presence all around her, watching, waiting for her to make a move. "You cannot escape me, Elara," the spirit hissed in her mind. "You are mine. Your soul will be mine." But Elara, with the last of her strength, raised the amulet high and slammed it into the ground with all her might. The earth shook, and the grave split open, releasing a torrent of dark energy that swirled around her like a storm. The spirit screamed in fury, its form twisting and writhing in the air. For a moment, Elara thought she had won, that she had broken the curse. But then, as the spirit began to fade, it whispered one final curse. "You cannot undo what you've done, Elara. You may have broken my hold on you, but the darkness will always be a part of you. You will never be free." The spirit vanished, leaving Elara standing alone in the graveyard, her body shaking, her heart heavy with regret. She had survived, but at what cost? As she made her way back to the village, she knew that the amulet power had left its mark on her soul. She would never be the same. The villagers would never forget the terrible things that had happened, and Elara would never forget the pain she had caused, even to those she loved. The curse had been broken, but the darkness would follow her forever, a shadow she could never escape. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and comment. See you on the next one. Bye bye.